Right. So, in the previous session, we discussed about uh, solution architecture lifecycle part. What are the different tasks we usually perform? This is what something which we have discussed in the previous session. In this regard, if you remember, when I discussed about this part, we have discussed even about the logical conclusion of the project when we are developing it. Because in reference to the logic of business logic, what is that are we going to implement from the point of logical design? Because as far as the pre-deployment process itself is concerned, when we are working on the logical designs, there are two things as I stated. One is about the logical architecture. Second, about the deployment scenario is what something we have discussed in the previous one. In reference to the logical architecture, whatever being a solution architect, when we try to understand about implementing the logical architecture. So wherein this we need to understand from four different directions, because as far as the tiers of the application, which can be classified into four different parts. So one is about the client tier, the second one about the presentation tier. At the same time, the next one about the business service tier, followed by the data tier. So these are the four different types we have, right? So whenever there are any kind of components that represents any kind of standard logical types are we implementing, right? So as well as representing any kind of infrastructure service levels and all, there must be an understanding over the interactions between the components, which are majorly depending on the functions when we are working on different interactions between the infrastructure service levels, or else the kind of roles within the existing application architecture, wherein by interacting within the business logic layers, etc., all that. So in regard to that, whenever we being a solution architect, when we try to understand about the logical architecture from all the four different types, either it can be a presentation layer, it can be client layer, presentation, or business service and data layer. It's always important for us to understand from access management point of view, where whatever the accessing of user information, which normally stored in the directory server initially to start with. At the same time, whatever the single sign-on authentication authorizations for the portal servers and all, followed by this, whatever the web-based components in the presentation tier, when we are managing, must be ensured with some messaging server components and all, including whatever the message storing we have. Either it can be messaging server, STRs, or data tiers, or at the same time sending and as well as retrieving the components in the business service tiers, followed by any kind of HTTP access components and communications. So whichever existed in the presentation tier, right? So all these things will comes under this category. At the same time, whenever we try to understand the logical architecture, which also majorly focusing on the kind of dependencies between various Java enterprise components and all, either it can be portal servers, for example, depending on the communication, which expresses for its messagings and as well as canal channels. At the same time, access managers for authentication, authorization services, all that. Majorly, these are the components which are depending upon the directory server for user information as well as configuration of the data, wherein whatever the number of components which are required for the web container servers provided by web servers and all everything comes under this Java Enterprise Server solution, what we are going to provide in this regard. So being into a solution architect from a Java perspective, this sort of understanding is always important when we want to develop any logical architecture. So there are different tools now and then we use, like we have a tool called StarUML. We have a tool called Lucid Charts, right? We have a tool called Visual Paradigm, Enterprise Architect. So there are a lot of tools now and then were available, StarUML, right? So we have a lot of tools available now and then to create architectures for a better visualization about the logical understanding and as well as explanation is what something which is essentially needed. This is what something being a solution architect, when we try to understand about the logical architecture from the logical design point of view, as part of solution life cycle itself is concerned. Being a solution architect, Java solution architect, one must be good with. This is all about this session, and tomorrow I'm going to discuss about the deployment architecture, because this is where generally today we discussed about the logical architecture. In the next session, I'm going to discuss about the deployment architecture, which is part of deployment designs, etc. All that. So which is part of deployment, right? So if you have any questions, please go ahead.